Okay, let's see if this is going to work any better. I have no clue if I'm live or not. Oh, here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me if you did. So I figured I'm going to be blogging about Terraform and Grafana. So I decided I would just bring you along for it. So, I'm going to get rocking and rolling here. So what I like to do to get started is the first thing is I always start with my source control. I like to use Get Kraken. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create me a new branch. I usually put it in posts /tf Grafana. Keep it nice and simple. And that's it. And then I'll jump over to GoLand. I already have my blog here open. And then I try to work in GoLand as much as I can. That makes life a little easier for me. So I'm going to pop open my terminal. I want to create my new post. So I'm using Hugo, new posts / terraforming your Grafana dashboards. It's a good enough name for now. And so I have that name in there. And now that I have this name for this new post created, I'm going to open up my new post. Nice thing about stuff having some of the Git integration is it should be pretty easy to find. So now it's open. I don't need that. So need to add some tags. We're going to do HashiCorp, Terraform, and Grafana here. Okay, so part of my process is typically, let's see here. Oh, it's an interesting alert I got. So this is my first live stream, so bear with me here. So typically I start off with an idea. So I need to learn Grafana. Well, I know Grafana, but I need to learn how to use Terraform with Grafana. So I know Terraform, I know Grafana, but I don't know how to interact with the two. So typically my blog posts start off with a concept of an idea. Typically these ideas are related to something I'm working on, or it's related to something I want to learn. So that's one piece of advice I would give you. Feel free to ask questions. So that's one piece of advice I give you when you're first getting started blogging, or blogging in general, is try to make it about something that you're doing on a regular basis, or something that you really want to learn or you're passionate about. That makes it easier to write, and it will also make it resonate a little bit better with your audience. I have found that the blog posts that I write that are that solve a specific problem that I've encountered are the ones that are most viewed, or the ones that I thought were kind of fun. I think that kind of fun, light attitude about it seems to come out. Okay, so first step for me, I'm going to look up the Terraform Grafana provider. I know one of these already exists, so might seem like I'm cheating a little bit, but I do. And we're going to go here and we're going to look at the list of resources in Terraform that I can control in Grafana. So I can do alert notifications. I can control the dashboard, data sources, folders, and organization. So that's a pretty decent amount of stuff that you need to do in Grafana. And then the other piece of information I need to focus on is the provider. So if I go down to the example, I just jump down there. The Grafana provider requires a URL and some auth. Now, I don't know anything beyond those two things, what they mean. So let's go up here and read. The URL required is to my Grafana server. So I'm going to need a Grafana server running that I can test this against. And typically what I'm going to do with that is I will spin up a container if I can, or run something on Kubernetes. I know for a fact Grafana has a Docker image. Their Docker image can use SQLite built into the image, so I don't even need to stand up a database. Sometimes when you're going to build a local environment to do testing and development, you might need to spin up a separate database. At that point, you could turn to Docker Compose or Helm chart in Kubernetes. If you're running on Ubuntu, then or anything that supports snap packages, then you could do a micro K8s install or a mini K8s type installation, so you have it all running locally. You don't need any fancy servers or anything. So that's typically what I'll do. And as you can already see as part of this process, I start with trying to get my code sample down and get all that figured out. If you don't start with your code, then sometimes your writing doesn't flow as well. So I typically go from my code to writing the blog post, so I can write it around my experience, first of all, because I'm no longer writing it from a place of inexperience. I'm writing it from a place where I've actually done the work. I wouldn't say I'm the most experienced person from just doing it to do a blog post, but that is experience that I wouldn't have before. So that also makes your writing a little bit more authentic, in my opinion. Okay, so I'm going to need Grafana running, and I'm going to need the auth. The auth is an API token. It's interesting. You can use a username or password. I'm going to say that you should probably use an API token. I don't know how API tokens work in Grafana, so that's the second thing that I need to figure out. So now that I've done my research on the Terraform provider for that, let's kind of go look at Grafana API token, and let's just kind of see what's in the documentation here. Oh, there was a tutorial right back there. I got a little ahead of myself. So we can see here the latest Grafana. There's a tutorial, basic auth or API tokens, create a new organization and an API token. So we can do basic auth with admin. So, you can put it in the URL. That would be good for like a blog tutorial, right? But that wouldn't be how I would do this in production. That's another tip of mine, is that I'm typically not going to do it the easy way sometimes, to just show it. I try to at least do it how I would do it in a production environment, because then that's what you're going to be Googling for. That's what I search for when I'm trying to solve a problem, is because I'm in the context of I'm trying to do this for real. And sometimes toy examples or examples that don't have the right steps in there are going to be the ones that make it really difficult for me to learn. So, that's part of the big thing there too. So I'm going to jump over here to the stream real quick. Just say hi, just in case nobody's wanting to chat or interact. So given that I know that I need to do this, I just need to spin up a Docker container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, yet again, just search for Grafana Docker. They got a nice little example here. We'll use the Alpine image. We could pull the Ubuntu version. Alpine's a little smaller. So basically this is all I need to do. Is Docker run, put it a port, Grafana, and I know the password's going to be admin. So let's copy this, and we'll add a name because we're nice here. So, I spent all this time talking about like, whoa, you got to do things like this in production, production ready. I am not going to specify a specific version when pulling down this Docker container. Like it's not really worth it, but I will put in the name. So, and I thought I had this set up. So if you don't want to run into this error, you need to add your user to the Docker group. I just haven't done that yet, so we'll have to. And that's running. So let's see if we can connect to our Grafana instance. And let's try admin. And they want a new password. I won't tell you all what my super secret demo password is. Sorry. Okay, so I have that set up. So let's try to figure out where these API keys are. Oh, look, right there in the menu under configuration, API keys. Let's generate a new API key. We're going to call this Terraform. I would recommend naming these with good names. Terraform, if this is for testing, then call it testing. If it's for production, call it production. And then I'm going to make this an admin, and I'm not going to give it a time to live. That's really cool that you could do that. But yeah, let's give it a 1 year. We should at least rotate it at some point in time. So now I have my API key. So that's cool. So what I'll do is copy that, and then I'll go into my blog post, and I will make a note of what that key is. Is that the full key? I don't think that is. No, of course it's not. That's the full key. Okay. Okay, so now I have my API key, and we know what my URL is going to be, which is HTTP localhost 3000. So now we got our two pieces of information for our provider. So what we should do is we'll just copy this out of here, and we're going to make us a new file. Actually, let's hop over here. I'm going to go up. I'm going to make me a new folder. I typically do it this way. And then I'm going to make my main.tf. Okay, let's go back up. Let's get back in our root. Actually, we'll stay where we're at here. Okay, so I'm in this folder. And then from here, I will open up that main.tf I just made. And of course, I don't have my Terraform plugin installed. So if you're using JetBrains IDEs, which I pretty much only use anymore, you can see here that they got support for HCL. So I'm going to install that. And I'm going to have to reboot GoLand, which we'll just go ahead and do to get that activated. Sorry, I thought I had this machine set up, and I know for a fact that I don't have Terraform installed on here. This is Ubuntu Mate 20.04, so I'm running the beta version at least for 2 more days. And my main desktop here is running Manjaro. So if my setup's not perfect and my sound's not perfect, everything was originally for my first few videos where I was recording desktops and code was really focused around sending that information through Ubuntu. So I'm going to have to make some changes there. Oh, look at me trying to type in the wrong place. 2 mice, 2 keyboards. I'm going to interact with chat too, but thanks, Daniel. Glad you joined. I mean, there's 2 people watching this, so. Okay, so we now have our main.tf. If we go back to our sample here, we can pretty much just copy this straight up. Paste this in here. Yep. Okay, so we know this is going to be localhost 3000. And then if we hop back over and grab our API key here, paste that. So now that's it. Like we can ideally, if this works, we can talk to Grafana. So I didn't see any data providers in the Grafana. They're all resources, so it's not like you can query and get information out. Maybe that's a little bit of a miss. But let's go to the Grafana folder. Let's start with something simple. So let's grab this. And we'll paste it in here. So this is a resource for a Grafana folder. In Terraform, resources, things you want to create. This is the name that identifies this resource uniquely. So we'll just call this test. I'm not going to do anything fancy here. And then for the title, we'll just call it test folder. Okay, so that's it. This is the bare minimum Terraform that I need to make sure that I can connect to a Terraform a Grafana instance with Terraform and actually execute something with an API key. So I got Grafana running. We can check that here. I should fix that. Every time I got to type a password, I'm afraid you are going to find out what it is. So you can see here, it's running. So we're good. Let's clear that out. I don't think I have Terraform installed. So let's just type the Terraform command. No, I do not. It's going to recommend you install the snap version of Terraform. If we hop over here to the snap store and we look up Terraform. Now, typically I like using snaps, but this one I don't think is kept as up to date as I would like. And it's not, so it's not updated past 11, right? And all the syntax that I'm using in my post is version 12. Well, you can't tell the difference here, but I am using version 12, or I will be. So we're going to go ahead and install 12. To get that over with. So typically all you need to do is I can't go to Terraform's website. I'll show you the manual way to do this, not just all with command line. So you can go here, you can go to downloads, you can jump down here. We want the 64-bit Linux version. That's downloaded. We can pop open this and go to downloads. We can extract to here. And that's it. So I have Terraform here. Now I want to put that somewhere on my path. I'm a little weird. I don't like putting things in user bin. I like to keep things as local to my user as I can. So I just pasted this inside of my username.localbin, my home folder .localbin. On Ubuntu, that is typically added into your path automatically. So to kind of show you that, let's get us a full terminal open here. We can vim my bash RC. And should be in here. If it's not in here, it's in my profile. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So you can see here, they have it set up in Ubuntu, especially that if you have a bin folder under local, then it adds that to your path automatically. So no magic. So now if I terraform, didn't find it, I'm going to have to exit the terminal, open it back up. Okay. Yeah, that's not going to work, is it? Had to get on the live stream where I'm extra nervous about this. We can just, we'll just take the shortcut here to that. There we go. So let's go back up to our folder since I closed that to TF Grafana. So if I list here, we see main.tf. So we can do a Terraform init. And this is going to pull down all your plugins. And your plugins are going to be all your providers. So we call the Grafana provider here. They know to go pull down the Grafana plugin, as you can see here. If you wanted to pin this to a specific version, you can. It's always a good idea to specify a minimum version. If not, pin it to a specific version. And the reason is that sometimes older versions, if people don't do a fresh init, are not going to pick up any new things that you might add. And so that's going to catch that. If you do a greater than 1.5, you'll get bug fixes. But if breaking changes get introduced, you're going to get those automatically too. So, typically that's not the case, but something to keep in mind. Okay, so let's run this and see. So let's plan. So we applied first. We initted, so now we're going to plan. It says it's going to add a new folder called test folder to Grafana. So let's see if it actually runs. So we're going to run Terraform apply. Yes, we want to add a new resource. And look, it said it added it. So are you skeptical? I am. So let's go back to the main page. Do we see any folders? It's dashboards. I'm not seeing anything that looks like a folder. Now, I don't know if off the top of my head, folders should just show up. Let's create a folder. So if I go back to dashboards, oh, no, it's there. Okay. So, as you can see, test folder was there. So, that's the initial part of how I'm going to start this post. Is now I got a simple example working with this. So we got Grafana stood up. We got the API key. We've got the Terraform all kind of in place. We know we can connect to it. We know we can create a folder. So we can try to create organizations. Organizations is a good way to limit permissions and views to certain dashboards. Think about that when you're adding people with rights management and things like that. You might want to organize your Grafana stuff by org. You can also do it a couple of different ways too, but because as far as I remember, you can set permissions on folders, so you can add individuals that way. That gets tiresome, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go over here and see what other resources we have. We can add a data source, so that's a big one. Data sources in Grafana are what you use to create your dashboards from, and those being in configuration management are actually going to be kind of nice, or infrastructure as code with Terraform. So that'll be a good example. Creating a dashboard. Again, the way I look at this is this makes the Grafana database be less important if I'm doing all this from infrastructure as code, right? So I'll probably hint at that and discuss that a little bit from my perspective when I start talking about in my blog, like how you would use it. So you see what example they have for a dashboard. So now here's an interesting one. So what they have done is they've using this. So that's fascinating right here. So what they're wanting you to do so you can take your Grafana dashboard and export it out as JSON, and then store that JSON, and then you could build it in JSON if you wanted to. And then you would set that config JSON in the dashboard to create it. And then they show that depends on. That's another one that I'll probably discuss a little bit in my blog, is that that makes a dependency. So for example, the data source for named metrics, whatever that's going to be pointed to, needs to exist before you can create a dashboard that uses that. So that's something to think about, is building out these dependency chains. Typically, Terraform can figure that out based on how you use things together. If you're referencing something about a resource in another resource, like, parent name or some ID or something like that, it implicitly knows that it's the dependency. In this case, since we're just loading a JSON file to make the dashboard, obviously it doesn't know what the JSON file has in it that depends on it. So you would have to do this explicit depends on. I will say, since you're kind of getting it behind the scenes, this file here loads a file, right? But I can build inline files inside of my Terraform. So if I go to my Terraform here, I can go to my template provider. Is a fine example. Where's template provider? So I can use the data template file. I can load one in and pass in variables. So like I could say I'm going to pass in a data source variable that gets applied. Maybe my data sources are not the same. Maybe I have different environments of Grafana, and then, dev and test. And so, I can, what I can do is I can template that data source. And then when I'm passing in the variable for that template, I would use that data source's name, which would build out that dependency graph for me. So I would build my template file with the variable, which would link them together. And then my dashboard would load the JSON that was generated from the template file, which then chains that together. So that would build out my dependency graph. So this is just things going through my mind right now while I'm looking at this, trying to break it down. And, do I want to make a post about that? That's probably is a good blog post idea, is to do a blog post about dependency graph in Terraform. So I'm going to make a note over here in my handy dandy notebook about how to do that. So TF post about. Okay, so that's really loose idea there. So it's, write a post about dependency chains in Terraform. This is stuff you don't think about normal, and you read a simple blog post or a little how-to guide. You get hints of it, but nobody ever breaks it down and explains it. So that's a potential for another good post, right? So at this point, I kind of, high level discussed and talked through like what I'm thinking. By the way, I probably should have started this out with letting you know that I'm probably going to end this about 9ish. So I may not get into the actual writing part, but I don't think that's the interesting part, right? It's the interesting part's like breaking the problem down and figuring out how you're going to write about it and what you're going to have running about it. So when you're thinking about your ideas to write a blog post, make sure it's something you can build locally, right? I make it a point not to use anything directly work related or even work resources when I'm writing my blog posts. Your company may be different about that. I've never had the topic ever come up because I've avoided that as much as possible. So keep that in mind when you're trying to write a blog post. Don't give away any secret sauce that belongs to anybody. So, and try to share things that are, kind of interesting and generic in some ways. Like, like this one, Terraform and Grafana. Like it's pretty generic, right? So, but this is going to be something I'm going to use, right? Like it's relevant to my everyday. A lot of people use Grafana. So anyway, enough of that sidebar there. I'll get back on topic here. If you want to ask questions, anything specific you want to know what's going through my mind, or like, approach I'm going to take with writing. But I'm just throwing this stuff out here. So I probably do want to build a dashboard, and I can tell you right now, to build a dashboard, I'm going to have a data source, right? So, me getting here and just talking about this and being like, oh, you can create a folder or you can create an organization. That's all ancillary, right? That's not the meat and potatoes. That's not what you're really here for. That's not what you're going to come read a blog about. Excuse me. You're not going to, that's not going to make a big difference. Creating a folder or an org, right? The big value add is your dashboards or adding data sources. A little bit more difficult stuff. So this tells me right here that I'm going to have to figure out what kind of data source I want to add. It needs to be something with some data in it, right? Because I want to leave you with enough information that you can kind of have a basic environment running that you can test and do this yourself. If you're reading this blog post, so you could pull down the Grafana Docker container, you could pull down another Docker container, you could install Terraform, and you could follow along and have it executing. So not all of my stuff turns out perfect like that. I get plenty of people giving me feedback with bugs and with errors. And then I go and edit my post and try to incorporate some of that feedback. Not always, time. You got to weigh it, right? So like me live streaming, writing blog posts, was kind of me saying that I go through this process and do a lot of background work that people I don't think know goes into a blog post. But on the opposite side, if I spend my time trying to make YouTube videos or any type of video content, I'm not focusing on writing on my blog. So that was kind of the inspiration for this live stream, was at the end of this, I'm going to end up with two artifacts. I'm going to end up with kind of how I go through writing my blog posts. And And I'm also going to end up with an actual blog post, right? Because you can search all day long and you don't end up on YouTube, and you're not going to watch a 10-minute or an hour long live stream of me doing something, right? Or the video after the fact. You're just not going to do that to solve a problem at work. But you can go read a 5-10 minute blog post. At your leisure. You can pull it up and leave it on a tab that's open. You don't have to worry about it. So I feel like this is going to be the path forward for me for a lot of things, is I'm going to try to combine the two. So that way there's an artifact that people can go back to. I can go back to. That's another thing about blogging in general that people miss out on, is a lot of my blog posts are for me, or for people I work with, or for friends, or some community member that asks me, hey, how do you do this? I've heard you talk about it. You have some blog posts related. Can you clarify this? So a lot of my content is just me getting things that I do on a regular basis, or things that I can reference back to. It does get kind of annoying sometimes when people ask you how to do something and you're like, well, here's a blog post that tells you how to do it. Feels like, kind of wrong in some ways, that's what you're doing. But, that's why you create it, right? So you can reference it. Okay, so enough of this talking. I need to figure out what kind of Grafana data source I want to use for my blog post. So we're good here. Let's pull up another tab. Grafana data sources. Let's look through the list here and let's see what kind of interesting data source we can pull. My gut would be like, oh yeah, just, pull something from Azure or CloudWatch or whatever, but not everybody has access to that. Or not everybody wants to spend the money. So we can pull from, no CloudWatch, no Monitor, Elasticsearch, Stackdriver, Graphite, Influx. Okay, that's a cool one. Mixed, MS SQL, Prometheus, test data. Look at that one. I've never seen this one before. So, this one looks promising, right? Is mock test data with mock. So can I find any example CSVs? And look, and here's an added benefit of figuring this out is if I need to log a bug or post feedback, then, I can do that, right? Because I can start with test data. So I think I'm going to go this route. And there's some test dashboards. So that means there's some test data here already. So, do I want to use this one? Does anybody have any opinions? I don't know enough about these to seed some test data. OpenTSDB sounds interesting, but I'm going to have to run an instance of that in a container. Which is fine, right? We're not going to write this blog post in an hour. There'll probably be another one. That just working through this, right? I'm going to have to think. Does anybody watching have any suggestions? Just type it in the chat. What data source you think I should use? The test one, Influx. I'm rolling out any cloud providers right now. I can tell you that. Anything cloud related, it's not going to work for this, right? Because requires people to have access to cloud to learn it, and that's just not fair. So, what's Loki? Oh, that's Grafana's log aggregation system. What? Is that what? Yeah, that's what this says it is. Never heard of it. MS SQL, I could probably find some time series data. The mixed data source I've never used. I've used the SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, and Postgres. Prometheus, and just Prometheus might be an easy example. So this is a point. I need data. What I could do is fire up micro K8s, and then turn on the metrics server and collect a bunch of metrics from micro K8s, and then I could use that as a data source. But not everybody's using Kubernetes, right? That would be cool though, but that requires a lot of orchestration and pre-planning that maybe I don't want to do. So I've been wanting to learn about OpenTSDB. So let's check out that project here. So download it from GitHub. We'll check it out. Check on the documentation here. Okay, so we have somebody in the chat saying Prometheus is their default. Well, of course it is. You know, you're doing some Prometheus collection, right? So you did write a Prometheus exporter. So you probably want to use Prometheus with Grafana. But that seems like such the obvious answer, right? Yet again, I will probably say that part of me blogging's learning. I might have said this already. So sometimes I pick things that I don't normally do. If I want to write a quick post and focus not on more of a concept and explaining something to someone, then what I will do is I will stick to something I know on the technical side, so I can focus more on the philosophical side. For a post like this, I know Terraform pretty well. I'm comfortable with Grafana for the most part. So while I never know how to navigate the UI in Grafana, that's not here nor there. You'd think I've never used it before. This is a chance to play with something new too, right? So, but it's good because a lot of people are probably going to use Prometheus with Grafana. But I feel like there's enough examples out there that if you could follow this one for something else, then you could jump in and use it with Terraform, no problem. So OpenTSDB here. I've also never used Influx, so that might be an option. I'm interested in both. Let's check out Git here. What I'm kind of doing is seeing how they package their project, because I may be very lazy, and if there's not a Docker container of some sort, I probably will not use it. So just know there doesn't appear to be a bespoke, like, supported by the project version. Yeah, I don't want anything to touch Mesos. Sorry. Oh, so there is one. Okay. So there is one. So this is the repository for the official. Looks like it's new. So, well, this was a year ago. This is 15 days ago. So that makes me feel a lot better. So boy, this feels cutting edge. I don't feel like OpenTSDB was cutting edge tech, but you start looking for containers and you realize there's not any are easily available, or there's still snapshot versions. Wow. So let's go on to GitHub here. I'm curious now. I'm looking into this. So 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 5, 8. So I was fixing to say, this is I thought this was fairly, like, not as new as you would think it'd be. Put that on the back burner here for a second. Let's check out Influx. That's another one I've been wanting to. It's a lot to go. Let's see here. It's another time series database, of course, right? Install from source, getting started. I can point my browser to localhost. Yep. So I know there's probably a container for this. Look, another thing called Flux. How many fluxes can we have? Okay, so let's see if we can get some. See what kind of sample data we got. So this is another thing I'm going to do typically, right? Is what I will do is I will comb through documentation for projects and try to look for some examples. Do they have example datas? Do they have some example things to do? So like, if they had a graph here that they produced from their data, then, I would try to make that my dashboard, and then I would connect to the sample data set and Terraform all that, right? Because why reinvent the wheel and build a whole example from scratch when if you're coming to my blog post looking for how to do Grafana with Terraform, and I happen to have an OpenTSDB example, and that's kind of why you were there to begin with, then it would help that I use other bits and bobs from other documentation. So there's not so much new stuff, and you have that consistency of seeing it. Of course, depends on how it's licensed, right? Like, respect copyright, don't plagiarize. I don't think anybody's going to get upset if you use their sample data set that they have for you learning how to use their tool, and you show people how to use that sample data set in a different tool. Like, that's only going to help the project, right? Because it's not going to make people get frustrated and say, oh, well, there's no OpenTSDB examples with Terraform and Grafana, so I'm just going to walk away and use Influx or Prometheus or whatever, right? I mean, they'll have their own different use cases. Don't get me wrong there. But that's part of what I think about when I'm doing these. Okay. So this one, I don't feel like, maybe Influx would be easier, but that seems obvious too. There's lots of Influx stuff. I really want to learn how to use OpenTSDB. So, but I feel like I may be flying a little bit by myself here. So, especially with the Docker file. So I may not want to take this on. Learning all this. So that's part of it. And oh, by the way, you see me using Opera. Nobody's asked yet. I don't use Opera on a day-to-day basis. I'm using Opera for this because it has nothing in it. There's no bookmarks. There's no password manager. It's just a clean browser. Right. So that's why I'm using Opera. Not super paranoid, but yet again, I think about that things. Usually when I take screenshots, I try to prep my browser, turn off bookmarks and things like that. Not from a privacy perspective, but more from a distraction perspective. Because you might get too much of the browser in there. And I think it's important to show the browser frame a lot of times so that people know it was real, right? That it wasn't just one you had laying around or whatnot. So that stuff might not matter to you. And that's okay. I don't think people really care. If people do, let me know that means something or doesn't. I look at that kind of stuff. So, I'm kind of aware. So I don't know where. Go here and check out this image here. Okay, there's a little bit of instructions here for how the image is built. What's the base? I don't know. I'm not saying. So, I'm probably not going to use OpenTSDB at this point, right? We spend a lot of time looking at this. I've spent a lot of time just chatting it up. I'm probably just going to run with Influx. That's just as good as any other time series database in my mind. But there's going to be a little bit better documentation, I think. And they have Docker images. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more content that I can find, like other blog posts, that's going to help me know how to use it. So between now and the next time that I do this, I will probably be getting myself up to speed on Influx. So that way when I come back, I'll have a game plan for how I kind of want to do this. So another thing that I typically do at this point, I have this main.tf working, right? So I know my provider works. So what I will do is I'll hop back over here. I don't need that anymore. I will put a code fence in here. So I got my provider. So I can say, so I'm just saying this adds the provider. So now what I want to do is make me some notes, some placeholders. So I'm wrapping up right now. There's a few more people that have joined since we started. If you got any questions, you want to know anything specific, go ahead and ask. I'll try to do a recap and stuff here in a minute. Well, actually, my notes will kind of be a recap. So, I know I can connect to the right. Prove that out already. I've created a folder. So I know I can connect and create a folder. So next, I want to configure sample data in InfluxDB. Using a container. So I'm going to run Influx locally in a container. And then I will create a Grafana data source to the Influx database and create a dashboard. So that's going to be what I need to do. So the things I'm going to have to figure out between now and next time will be, getting Influx running in a container, like what settings and things I need there. And then finding some sample data sets that I can use, preferably some with good documentation. So if people are reading that documentation, they can come over and check out the blog post. So I'll probably change the title a little bit and put Influx in there. That will help with some search engine optimization. It's a nice keyword to have. And so I'll have Terraform, Grafana, Influx. Not a bad trifecta in my mind. And then I will have it referencing. I'll have it referencing some sample data that people might stumble across, and then from there, I will build up a Influx with that sample data, use some of the sample queries, and try to build a graph. So between now and the next live stream, I'll probably do a little research in Influx. And I know nothing about it. I've never used Influx, really. So this is going to be a learning for me. So I'll get to share that. That may or may not turn into a blog post. So, that's just how it is. And so that's something that you can kind of see right now in this initial live stream about what goes into blogging. There's lots of all these little ancillary things, like learning about API keys in Grafana. I've been running Grafana and responsible for a Grafana instance for a year. It's not, it's not customer facing or stuff. It's internal use, but never set up an API key. Never had need to. So I've learned that tonight. I've run Grafana locally, so that's no problem. I've run it in a container. And then don't know anything about Influx, so I've picked Influx. So I'm going to have to learn about Influx. That's kind of cool. So I believe it's the former lead for the Ubuntu desktop team now works for InfluxDB, I believe. Let me verify that. It's Will Cook, right? Did I get the name right? Yep. Will Cook. So he used to work for the Ubuntu for Canonical on the Ubuntu desktop team. Now that's Martin Wimpress, who makes Ubuntu Mate. And he now works for Influx. So, that's kind of a cool side note there. Which is kind of neat because you realize it's such a small world when you start getting into tech and finding things. So I got some Influx learning to do to wrap this all up. And then I think I'm going to call it at this point. So I'll make this far. Well, hold on. Before I call it, another part of my process is I'm not, while I can have the code local, if I lose this hard drive, no big deal. I've lost some code. Hopefully at that point, any code or setup that I've had that I've ran through, either I know it or I've captured it in my blog post. And so that's another good, if you're super paranoid about making sure that your things keep working, would be to delete all the stuff that you did and then read your own post and copy the samples and recreate it all from scratch and make sure it works. At least works on your machine, right? That's better than shipping it and never have testing it from scratch, right? So typically I don't keep any of this scratch code that I make that I use to make a post. Sometimes that does end up in GitHub, And I'll put a link to that in my blog post. Typically, if I have a GitHub repo of some stuff, if there's a lot of setup or stuff. So like, for example, I got to run Grafana and an Influx database container. So what I'll probably do is I may make a compose file that launches both of those containers. So that way you can work through the blog post easier. Not written a lot of compose files, but yet again, it's another opportunity for me to get better at something that I don't do all that often. So I'll probably do that. It's just a nice throw in for the post to make it easier for people to do. So if you enjoyed this, let me know. Give me some feedback on Twitter, here on YouTube, LinkedIn. You can find me at phillipsj.net. There's a bunch of stuff in the description of my videos. There probably will be in this one. I have buy me a coffee set up. No subscriptions, just one-time stuff. So share this with other people that you think might find this interesting. Let me know if I blabbed on a little too much. I feel like live streams are probably a little bit more chatty like this. So if you would prefer it not to be, let me know. But that's it. So thanks for watching, everybody. And we'll pick up again maybe later in the week or over the weekend. I'll try to get a little bit better notice than this one. I just wanted to get the first one out of the way. But this is generally what it's like for me writing a blog post. So I'm going to have more posts, and I will do more live streams of me kind of thinking through the process. Some I know will be quick, and I'll sit down and just do it. And we'll talk through it. And then some of them are going to be more like these, where there's a lot more research and work to do. So when I stopped here halfway through blabbing, talking about not having stuff local, right? What I need to do is flip over here. And I'll just stage it all. It's the initial start. I don't care. What I'll do is I'll squash all this up and do a force push. And then only thing people will ever know is that I did it all in one go. If you went and looked at the history. Of course, now I'm documenting all of these secrets and hacks that I do. So now people know my stuff. So just removing the magic. Well, that's it. We're going to shut this down. Thanks for joining. Talk to y'all later.